Okay, today we're talking with Bob Wallace. The interviewer is Mike McGregor from the Grand Valley State University's Veterans Oral History Project. To begin, Bob, when and where were you born?
Plattsburgh, New York, in June 6, 1942.
And did you grow up there?
Yes, I went to high school there. It's upstate New York, right?
Okay. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Plattsburgh. What were you involved with?
Basically sports, that's all I remember. I played football, baseball, and a little basketball, not that much. But so I have one other brother who went into the Air Force. He would try to be a fighter pilot, but.
And what did your parents do?
My dad was a prison guard at Dannemore State Prison, and my mother was a registered nurse in Plattsburgh.
Okay, and then after high school, what happened?
I went to a junior college in upstate New York, Paul Smith's. It's Forestry College, and it's 2-year. It was 2-year then. It's now presently 4. And I took forestry, and after 2 years, I went to the University of Michigan, and I was in conservation water pollution, was my background, and I graduated. I was supposed to graduate in '64, but with the transferring of courses and things like that, I was about, I think, 6 hours short. So, but in the meantime, I went into the Peace Corps out of there before I got my degree, and I came back after the Peace Corps and picked up my degree in '66.
So you went into the Peace Corps in 1964?
Yeah, I don't know. Kennedy, in his campaigning for presidency in 1960, did a campaign speech at the University of Michigan where he set the Peace Corps. And since when he was assassinated in '63, November, they made a big to-do at the university, and they had this Peace Corps week where they tried to get a number of people to volunteer to go into the Peace Corps. And my roommate, who was a psych major, was, oh, this is the dream. I'm going to become a big Peace Corps volunteer. But he wasn't accepted, and I enjoyed taking that type of test just for fun. And I went with him just to take it, and I was accepted to go to West Africa and Nigeria. And my job when I was going there was to write the game laws of Nigeria. I had a bunch of wildlife courses and things, and it was the first group of Peace Corps volunteers that weren't teachers. It was community and rural development. And so it was exciting. We trained in Wilberforce, Ohio, and it was a very immersion. They brought Nigerians over to instruct us, and the area in Nigeria you were going to, they taught you that language. And Nigeria is a weird country. It has 260 languages, so everything was in total immersion. You did not, your dinner, your food was, everything was ordered by the language or else. So you learned like egg, so you get one word. So when you went in for the first week, it was like eggs. Everybody was getting eggs or something like that, because it's a tonal language, much different than it seemed like English, because I may be wrong now, it's been 40-some years, but like Ezi or Ezi, and one is chief and one is pig. And so it's quite, if you don't do the right, and I'll digress here just a second. But when I went after I got back from Vietnam and things like this, I went to work for U.S. Customs. And every time I get a Nigerian from the same area that I was from, I talk to him in his native. I learned my language is Igbo, which is one of the 3 major languages. And I'd speak to him, and he'd answer immediately. Then you could see it going click, 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 and then all of a sudden, he understood that, hey, this guy is talking to me in my language. There's something wrong here, but it was kind of funny in the sense that because I talked to him in his language, I was his brother. And I don't know if you're familiar with Nigerian, but there's a lot of fraud and things involved with Nigerians that, you know, they're trying to get money and things like this. And so I was in trouble a lot of times because whenever they were questioned, they say, "Oh, my brother works over in such and such a place for U.S. Customs." But it was really, I'm probably digressing here too much. But
That's very interesting. How long was this immersion training? How long?
we 3 months,
Okay.
and it was funny. The Peace Corps, they say, is 2 years, but originally, now I think they send direct. You know, you go and they don't have this training, but ours was training, and that didn't count on your. So it counted, but it didn't. Like you only had 1 year, 9 months overseas, but it was a. You know, that was the thing that was so different about my experiences with when I came back from the Peace Corps. They guaranteed me 1 year, the draft board, to be reaccustomed to the U.S. and things like this. And to the day, it was lucky it was that because I went to school and picked up a lot of credits for others. You know, I stayed the whole year, but to that day, boom, you know, the letter was there when I got it.
So in Nigeria, then did you write the game laws, or?
Well, when I
what
went there,
happened when
it was kind of disastrous. There's no animals. They've been eaten. It was really, you know, there's the monkeys and bushmeat and things like that, and snails and things, you know, huge snails. But the most animals, every once in a while, an elephant or something like that, but not the. So then they decided that, well, you know, it's kind of easy to write game laws if there's no game. So they said, we better do something else for you. And Nigeria got its independence in 1960, and the British, when they just left. They didn't instruct the people too much. There was real poor, and it kind of turned me off on the colonization, how they left these people. You know, there was no helping them to set up their government, and it was really sloppy. And that's why I think there has been so much turmoil and overthrows and things of the government, because they weren't educated enough to establish the right government. But that's my idea, you know.
Yeah.
Somebody else who could probably really play. But so my job was to reestablish the teak and mahogany and forest plantations, which was really a lot of fun. I was out into the, you know, jungle-ish areas. It was really.
When you say reestablish, what do you mean?
Well, they planted them, and when you get like 300 inches of rain a year, everything grows fast. And so they had been surveyed and planted, but since 1960, and this was 64, nothing was touched. So you couldn't tell the good trees from the bad trees. And so we went in with crews, 50 to 100 people, to reestablish the plantations that were there. And it was fun, and that was a lot of the things. One of the things that the Nigerians, maybe this I should, they didn't think white people ever went to the bathroom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so after 6 or 8 hours out in the jungle, you know, sometimes you have to find a spot. And so I just asked them, "Where do you go?" And they looked at me like, you know, and then I went over and went to the bathroom, and they couldn't believe it. And they looked at me, and it was really strange that I did it, and you know, in front of them, kind of, not, you know. And another funny, I'm probably digressing too much here, taking up too much time. I always ask them, because the fruits over there are unbelievable. And I say, does a monkey eat this? And they say, yeah, monkeys like this. So I'd eat it. And they say, no, no, that's terribly poisonous. That's poisonous. And so they watch me eat all this fruit that I say, does a monkey eat that? Yeah, the flavors were unbelievable. And it was, they got, went off the deep end on it. But
So you did it, if the monkey ate it, you
I
felt
figured,
it was safe for you.
yeah. And must be it was, because I'm still here.
Okay, you did your year in the Peace Corps.
2
and then
years.
I'm sorry,
The year
2
and
years,
9 months
your
overseas,
overseas stint, and then you came back to the States. So what did you do then?
I went to get my degree, finish up. My parents were, oh my God, they were against me even going to the Peace Corps because they thought I wouldn't go back to college, but I went back and got my degree.
And you stated when you got back, the draft board gave you, said
That was
you
my
would be
part of my
touched for
year.
1 year.
That was my 1 year. And after 1 year, I got my little notice. I had to report to Albany. I went down there and lined up and had the physical and all that again. And we lined up and they went down 1, 2, 3, Marine. And you could see everything counting. And it probably would have been almost better that I would have got the Marine, because with the training I would have went through, I probably would have been out before even going overseas.
So what was the reaction to some of the guys who got selected for the Marines?
They were, see, the Marines were really, Quezon was big and all this, and they were, upset.
So what year did you, when did you get drafted?
April of 68.
Okay, April 68. So you went down to Albany, the induction center,
Yeah, and I got on a bus and went to Fort Dix and went my basic and AIT training at Fort Dix.
Your basic, and then was your AIT infantry AIT?
Yeah,
then?
yeah.
Okay. So you had infantry AIT at Fort Dix, and then what happened?
While I was in the basic training, they give you a lot of tests, and they come out and they said, well, would you like to go to OCS? And I said, geez, that might be a good idea, because that's 6 months. Vietnam could be over then. So I said, sure, I'd do that. And so it worked out. I went to basic, then I went to AIT, and then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for infantry training. And
On your, when you selected OCS, could you put in your request for what combat arms you wanted?
No, I don't even remember that. I think it was
Just infantry.
yeah. And I went through that, and that was quite an experience. I never had. I enjoy. It's weird, but I enjoyed it. I really did. And I was old. I was 26 when I was going through this. And I was Gramps, because all these guys are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old kids. And so I was Gramps. And they helped me. They thought they were helping me. Maybe they weren't, but it was. And then I enjoy shooting. I did a lot of, and Plattsburgh is in the Adirondacks. We had a camp out in a thing, and we always hunted ducks, geese, like that, and deer. And I enjoyed the rifle shooting, so I scored high and all that. And it was a thing, and I figured Vietnam will be over. It's only a matter of time. They're having peace talks. It'll be over. And so I figured as long as I could delay things. And then after I got out of OCS, they offered me, I went to Fort Polk as a training officer in the basic training to get some leadership or thing or whatever they do. And I went down there for, I think, one cycle, one basic training cycle. And then they offered me to go to jungle school in Panama, Canal Zone. And I went down there, and I really loved that. That was almost being like going home to Africa, because it was, you know, quite heavy jungle, and we were out map reading and things like that overnight, making our own lean-tos. And down there, they had a zoo at Fort Sherman, and if you caught a snake, they would pay $12 a foot. So the first day out, we're out for 7 days in this jungle. First day out, I come up and I see a boa constrictor. He's about 10 feet long. And I said, and he had just changed his skin, shed his old skin, and he was the most iridescent blues and oranges and beautiful color. And I said, man, that's $100 snake right there. And I grabbed him, and I had an extra shoelace, and I tied it around his head and around his tail. So his head was here and his tail was here, around my waist, and then up like here. And he would lick me. And I carried this sucker for 3 days. And then on the third day, it was just so hot and humid. And I said, I can't carry this for another 3 or 4 days. It'll kill me. And I finally let the thing go, and he went right up a tree. But it was the most beautiful snake.
How long was the jungle school?
That's fuzzy. I think about a month, maybe not quite a month. And when we left there, we flew to Charleston, South Carolina, and got on a C-41, and we flew to Traverse Air Force Base. And on the way to Traverse, I remember getting in the C-141, and you pay $2 or $3 for a box lunch. And the guy comes up in the plane after we took off, and he shoved my shoulder, and he says, it's time to get off. And I said, get off? I haven't had my box lunch yet. And he said, wow, you missed it. He said, you were sound asleep. I flew across country on a C-141, never woke up.
Okay, at this time, did you have orders for Vietnam then?
Yeah, I was on my way.
Okay.
I could have gone home, but I took when I left Fort Polk, I took 30 days then instead of after. And I'm a space fanatic. I've been to 25 shuttle launches and 2 Apollo moon rockets after I came back from Vietnam. And I got about 5,000 books on space. I'm really into. And so I almost drove. That was the Apollo 11 launch. I left Fort Polk, I think, on the 17th. And I decided, well, I better go home because it may be the last time. Oh, and a funny thing, I also bought a Corvette after I got my commission. I always wanted, in Africa, I always had pictures of Corvettes. And I figured, damn, I always wanted one, this may be it. So I got my commission that night and went down and bought a brand new Corvette. It's still parked in the garage in Plattsburgh.
Wow.
72,000 miles on it. 68.
Okay, so you were at Fort Polk training officer one cycle. Then did you get orders for Vietnam to go to jungle school?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You had orders for Vietnam, then you went to jungle school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you came back, and then you finished jungle school, went to Charleston, and then basically shipped out.
Yeah,
to
we
Vietnam
flew from Travis to Anchorage to Dakota Air Force Base to Saigon.
So you arrived in country in Saigon. Did you know what unit you were going to then?
No.
Okay, so tell me about your first impression of the country when you got off the plane.
Well, we get on a bus, and the whole bus the windows are caged. So you're an animal in a cage. You get in this bus, and it's before they didn't want people throwing hand grenades in the bus. And they had a place there, and this is where I found out I was going to the 101st. They had CERTS training. And so we got on the bus and we went to the CERTS training where there's the funny things you remember about, things I probably should have been looking at and things like that. But I remember them giving you a little red pill, and you put it in your mouth and you rub it all around your teeth. And then they had a dentist there looking and to see where you hadn't brushed your teeth correctly or where your something. I said, this is weird. Here I'm going into the war, and they're worried about my teeth, you know. And that always struck me as I don't. But then we went through this course, and they gave you booby trap thing where you walk through these trails that the little kids would booby trap to really embarrass you, because these are 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, and they put two pieces of like a gum wrapper, the tin foil and gum, and type wire to it over to a battery with a quarter-pound TNT off in the jungle, and you walk down this trail and you'd hit this, you know, you weren't paying much attention, and you hit these two and set it off, and they said, there's your legs gone, you're over here, your body's gone. And so you're afraid to walk, you know, and then, you know, if you can't walk in the trails, you have to chop wood, and then if you're chopping brush, they're knowing where you are, so you figured, man, my time is short-lived.
Now, was this training the 101st training, or just
Yeah,
general training
yeah.
before?
I think it was the 101st. Now, see, that's not clear. By that time, I thought I was in the 101st, and
Okay.
the certs, I thought it was Screaming Eagles training session or something like that. That's what I thought it stood for. And so then I got in a C-123, I think, a twin-engine transport plane. I flew up to where the 101st was, and the unit was coming back. They were out in the Ashaw Valley, and I flew out and landed on a highway out there, Mud Road, and that's where I first got into the company and introduced to my platoon that I was supposed to take over. And there'd never been a person, I don't think, in the military that was as nervous, as scared as I was. And the only thing that ever saved me, that was the guy, the sergeant in my platoon, the platoon sergeant, was his second tour of Vietnam, Sergeant White, and he was good. And I went to him the first night, and I said, Sergeant White, I'm as green as a green bean. And I said, there's nothing that I know to help me where I am right now. I said, there's nothing that can compare to this in my whole life. And he you know, he says, don't worry, I'll get you through it. And he did. And you know, some sergeants probably could have dominated me the whole time I was there. But anytime he had a decision, he'd come and see me, and he says, Lieutenant, he says, this is our problem, or this is what we got to solve. And he would tell me what the problem was, and then he would suggest, he said, if I was in a position to make the decision, this would be the decision I would make. And it wasn't like he was making me do it, but he really made me feel good that he was asking me for one, and being that I knew nothing. And he was fantastic, and he was there for about 2-3 months when I was there, and then he transferred out, and luckily it just so happens I got him another strike when he left. I believe I did, and I don't know, but he went out at E7. He was an E6 when I first came in, but he was really good. He really was.
Okay. And for the record, what unit were you assigned to?
Charlie Company, first platoon leader, the second of the 506.
506. So now you joined, whereabouts in Vietnam was a company when you joined them?
It was just coming out of the Ashaw. I went out, and then we went back to Camp Evans, our base camp, and we stayed there like maybe 3-4 days. The guys get new uniforms, new clothes, have a hot shower, things like this. And then we flew up to Mylock, which was up in the very edge of the DMZ. And then we combat assaulted out into the DMZ. And there was a, you know, you saw flying out, I could see like the rock pile, which was a big marine thing, and in my maps I had caisson area, and you know, I could see all these areas. And we combat assaulted in. It was the most impressive thing in my life to have I don't know how many helicopters. I thought about 20 or 30, 40 helicopters, Hueys, all lined up. And they took the whole company at 120 some people and brought them out at one time and went into the different landing zones into the DMZ. And it was really, really impressive, you know. It really made you feel good. The only funny thing was these little kids were there trying to get candy. Give me a candy, get your eye, give me candy. But what they were actually doing was writing all the frequencies on their arms. And they caught a bunch of them with all the helicopter frequencies written on their arms. And I don't know what, you know, so that was, and I remember, maybe it's a little it was a funny incident about, we were lining up to go to make this combat assault, and they had this father giving communion out to a bunch of troops, and they were lined up giving troops. And my Sergeant White, his wife sent him a Clorox bottle full of some whiskey. So these two guys were back to back giving, Sergeant White was giving everybody a shot of whiskey to get, you know. And it was really quite impressive. Not impressive, but it was really, you know. And it was funny. I probably would say I'm not really religious, but my parents were. And when I went there, I said, for 1 year, I'm nothing. You know, I can't be religious because I'm fighting the same people that are praying to the same God that I'm praying to, and it doesn't make sense to me. And it still doesn't. War to me doesn't make, that part of war doesn't make sense, that I'm here and I'm praying to supposedly the supreme being, and he's pitting me against somebody that's praying to him to kill me, and I'm trying to, so I said religion is a zero for this 1 year. I have no feeling whatsoever, and it probably worked out well. It probably slanted me a little later, but not to that much extent. But it was interesting. And we CA'd out, and we got on this hilltop, and it was horrific. They hit us just as we landed. The first helicopter, I was supposed to go north, and we were the second ones in. And the first helicopter was supposed to go to the right, and I was supposed to go to, my group was supposed to go, my platoon was going straight ahead, and when we landed. Yeah, because the contact was straight ahead, I was told to go to the right off the hilltop, and to get off the top, and we were taking all kinds of incoming mortars, and I think, and small arms and RPGs, and I'll always remember. That's the most striking thing in my whole year, in my memories now, is when we landed. Now, I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't had a bullet shot at me. When we landed on this LZ, this guy, they're dragging this U.S. soldier up the hill, try to get him on one of the last birds before, and the guy, they're pulling him by the legs, and his head's bouncing against the roots and everything. And this one soldier laying on the trail edge says, "Watch out, you'll hurt him." And the guy pulling his leg turned around and looked at him. He said, "What do you mean?" He's dead. And boom, my brain just exploded. It just, oh my God, what am I into? You know, and it was just eye-opening. It was just like the world exploded, and I'm looking at a strange scene. But you don't have time to think of it, but then you kind of boom, I gotta do something, I gotta do something. And then they, I don't know how much later, what, they called airstrikes in. And I'm a aviation buff fan, and I'm standing on this, it's a steep mountaintop, real kind of thing, but it's real kind of steep. And I watched these F-4 Phantom jets with Marine pilots, and they come in, and I'm looking in the cockpit as he's dropping 500-pound bombs and napalm on the side, and I'm looking into his cockpit, and he's lower than I am, and a piece of one of the bombs hit me, bounced off my helmet, a piece of about this long, about that wide. And I picked it up, and it was hot. It was really hot. And I looked at it, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. It was the stress lines made it pink and blue and all these colors. And I said, that's the most beautiful thing. I put it in my shirt pocket, and I forgot about it. A week later, I remembered I had it, so I went looking into my pocket, and then I finally found it, and I pulled it out, and it's all rusted because of the moisture from my uniform and things. I'd lost its luster, and then it just became a piece of fragment. But
So did that airstrike then basically
well, yeah,
end the engagement on that
it more like, yeah, and it may have been even after. They may have known that. After you learn after that, they strike and run because they know you can call the world in on them, and so they don't hang around. They didn't hang around it. They were unbelievable. You know, the Vietnam soldiers never got the credit. How they, you know, they lived on what they could carry. We lived on what helicopters could bring in. And it was the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, basically, what was your basic load when you were, you know, out in the field? What did you carry?
Well, I carried 18 magazines, M16. Everybody had to carry 50 rounds of machine gun. And I carried a couple hundred rounds because I figured a lot of guys carried more than, I was light on some. I carried a couple extra radio batteries for the RTO, and I carried about 6 or 8 smoke grenades and a couple star clusters. And I carried extra ammunition, not in you know, just bulk ammunition in the cardboard boxes. But and then I carried these sea rations that you have. You know, the sea rations. The weird thing is I liked them. You know, everybody else. And I like the weird stuff. I like the ham and eggs, which everybody, oh my God, the green eggs and ham kind of thing. And I still like the spam. You know, everybody says spam and rice is one of my favorite to this day. But you know, I went to an air show in Wisconsin. I go every year to EAA, Experimental Aircraft. And this year my wife, because I always carried a bag on the shoulder, she bought me a little rucksack. And I had that filled with just junk, you know, camera and a couple other things, and a couple water bottles maybe and things like that. I said, man, this is heavy. And, you know, I said, how did I ever carry that crazy ruck that I had? And you pick up things, like I was forestry background, so a lot of the shattered trees, I used to pick branches or a piece of wood. You know, I worked for U.S. Customs after I got out of service. Probably not good to say that I brought back samples of different wood that were, the colors and things were, so I picked that wood out of the, see, my idea of Vietnam, if you have to be there, it's good to enjoy something of it. You know, it's bad when it's bad, but most of the time it isn't. and it's best to enjoy what you can. And the human mind is a wonderful thing. I think you lose, the brain forgets the bad times, and you really rest on the good of the fun times you had. And that was a lot of, without myself, that was how I felt a lot of times. But
As a platoon leader, how many men did you have in your platoon?
which is, it was real, you know, you're supposed to have 40.
Okay.
But if you had 25, you were in pretty good shape, because you had people leaving, because everybody, they tried that would bring in units all at one time, and if you're really friends with people, it gets messy when people are wounded and things like that. So it's better to have people coming from that aren't known to you and things like that. So you had people coming in at all time. You had people working on going on R&R. You had people with appointments like medical, something wrong, like something with their feet or their, you know, they had to go to the rear area. And so you were lucky to have 25 at most of the time. And I think in some ways it was better. I think smaller was, it's probably not the ideal to have a small, but in that jungle and trying to move people, you get too many, you lose control of, especially moving through the jungle, because you get stretched out, and it's crazy for the length you can go.
Did you feel, though, that the constant flow of people in and out affected your combat effectiveness, or?
You know, here's a strange thing. Everybody says, everybody thought, you know, I felt sorry for the people back in the States, like my parents, watching the evening news. Because you turn on the evening news, and every day you're getting shot at. And I figure, holy God, they see the news, and they're thinking, you know, every day. I wanted to be shot at least once a week, for that particular reason. With the people coming in and people leaving, if you didn't get shot at least once a week, you could have 3/4 of your unit never having been exposed to any type of gunfire. And if the first thing, if somebody shoots at you over there, is to get down and return fire. But if you're new to the whole game, the first response is to look where it's coming from. You know, get up and look, not to get down and fire. And so you wanted to keep people alert, and you wanted everybody to be on the same page about how to respond to when you get it. And if you didn't get shot at least once a week, that was the response you got. You got half your guys were lost, kind of. You know, they didn't know how to respond. But if you were shot at once a week, not heavy, you know, I don't mean being overrun or something like that, but just a sniper taking a couple shots at you, and it worked. It really, I thought it worked. I felt much more secure.
And in your experience in your year, it happened about
Not sometimes not.
every week?
Yeah, not maybe not. You know, somewhere you may go 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
But sometimes you're out and you never got, like we go out and I think you could be out 30-40 days in the same pair of clothes, and you could take your shirt off and stand it up, because the sweat from the rucksack straps and things would be so white and so dense that your shirt would stand up because of the salt content in it. And you want it to be, I thought it was better to be, you know, and that's the trouble when you go into the rear. You go in there, and if you're laying around for 3 or 4 days and you come out, everybody's got that rear mentality. I enjoyed it more in the field. Not that I was gung-ho to be out in the field, but I felt safer. I just felt.
So you think after 3 or 4 days, the guys would lose their field sense from being
In some ways, you know, they go in and then, you
while they get back?
know, a beer was a nickel, I think, and a Coke was 10 cents, and you know, you can drink a lot of beer on a nickel of beer, and yeah, I think it just, you kind of got sloppy. I don't know. Maybe you know, we're talking 40 years ago, and I'm dreaming back, but our unit was really, as a whole unit, we were really close. It was really close, and the thing that I think is really important was knowing where you were. The maps were French maps from '54, I think, when we were there, and they didn't. The contour lines were 20-meter contour line. So it was hard to sometimes tell exactly where you were, and I thought I was pretty good map reader, and I think I was, and I'd always, every once in a while, just to let the guys know that I knew where I was, I'd shoot a white phosphorus 100 feet in the air over a hilltop, and I say to the guys, there's going to be a white phosphorus round explode over that hilltop, you know, maybe even a couple 100 yards away. And they'd see that I knew if we really needed support, I knew how to call in where we were, so I could call in artillery, I could call in medevacs, because some guys had no idea where they were, ever, you know. And that I think was the most important, is knowing where you are and what you can.
Yeah, it's been a pretty thick country sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now your first introduction to the war effectively was up on the DMZ when you went there.
Yeah.
Then what happened with your unit? Were you extracted? And
Yeah, and well, I think I'm not quite. We went to Eagle Beach. Was like after we pulled out of there. I think we got 5 or 6 days at Eagle Beach, which was a resort area in country, and we spent there. And then we went into the kind of lowlands, just out from Camp Evans. It was elephant grass area, and that was, I think, around Christmas. We were in this elephant grass, and it was funny at this time. It was Christmas, and they had the truce there, which it probably was a good truce. There wasn't that much, I think. And I said to my guys, it was rainy, wet, and cold, and I said to my guys, we never could build a hut, because if you build with a poncho on, if you're in an area where the moon is full or something, you lay a poncho out, it reflects the moonlight. But this night it was rainy, wet, it was Christmas Eve, and so I said to him, build a hut, it's Christmas Eve there, you know. And the next morning, our company commander, Captain Hale, flew over us, and it was Christmas morning, and the huts were still kind of up, and he flew over and he says, Wallace, you got a damn gypsy camp out there. And from then on, I was gypsy. I was always gypsy after that for the rest of my year. And I got my uniforms, I used to have, instead of Wallace on them, I had gypsy.
Okay.
On my thing. But it was relaxed, because it was more or less like a vacation. And then we went to a bunch of fire bases. We went to Birmingham, we went to Bastogne, we went to a couple others, Granite, I think, and we just stayed on top of these fire bases to support the artillery and just walking around them and things. And then we.
So how long were you doing that? Basically security around the fire bases. How long did that last?
Couples. Let's see. It was maybe from January, February, March, probably.
Of 70.
Yeah. 69, 70,
Yeah.
December. And we, it was, it'd be like, on some of these, they'd take a unit, one of the platoons, and take them out, combat assault them out into the jungle and kind of rift around, just to make sure that the enemy wasn't starting to build up in the area. And then about that time I decided, well, I've been out in the field about 6-7 months. I better go on my R&R, and then maybe I won't come back into the field. And so I went to Australia, and when I came back, our unit was hit on near Ripcord. This was when the starting of the Ripcord problem, and I wasn't anticipating going back into the field, and they asked me to go down to graves registration and identify the bodies that were killed in the couple days before I got there, or a day before I got back to the unit. And I went down, and it was, I lived with these guys for 9 months. And they weren't that they were really blown up or really badly disfigured, but with the red sand and the colors and I couldn't identify the black or white from the two. And it wasn't it was really strange. And I said to the guy, I said, and there was 2 guys from my unit, my platoon, and I couldn't even see them. It was weird. It really was. I'd never had that feeling before. I thought I'd walk in, yeah, he's that, there, he's that. And he said, don't worry, we know who they are because of the dog tags, but we like to have personal identification. I said, I'm sorry. And the next evening, they flew me out. And then I was all worried because I got new boots. And I think, oh my God. I had all these pair of boots, and they had spent my whole tour, and I figured when I went to Australia, I lost my low quarters. And so they took I flew with my combat boots, and when I went to Australia, they had to cook them. Well, when you cook nylon and rubber, you don't get much left. I got a puddle of nylon fused to some rubber. And so when I got back, I had to get new boots. And I figured, man, this is it. I'm a kind of person that loves, like I'm the old ball player, that wears his underwear for 3 days if he's in a winning streak. And I figured, man, and then we got there, and they said, tomorrow morning we're going top of Ripcord. And this is after Alpha Company got blown off the top. And that morning started about 5:30, and it was a beautiful, clear morning. And we went to the top, and luckily there was every step where you were waiting to hear, but we got up on top, and then we were digging around the top of the.
So you moved
right up it, yeah. Not a fire, not nothing. But when we got up to the top, we were digging in positions. And shortly after digging, there was this huge explosion. And the guy had dug up a hand grenade, and he set it in front of him, and it blew right up. And then we got some mortar rounds late afternoon. Then we stayed on there, and Captain Vasquez made us put these wire in, and some of the guys put it in, and he'd come up and he'd rip it all out, and he said, this isn't wire, you gotta have it down. And I think he saved an awful lot of people's lives by what he did, and what, I was impressed with him. He impressed me more than, and this was he had a go around in Korea, and this was his second tour in Vietnam, and so.
But he was your company commander?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you say wire, what are you talking about? Barbed wire or copper
barbed wire? Yeah,
or?
A regular barbed wire,
Okay.
and with engineering stakes,
Okay.
you wrap it, and it's so tight. The tighter you can make it, the better. And then we had concertina wire. We had so much wire, I think there was a shortage.
So basically, it was the whole company
Yeah.
on top of Ripcord, and you were fortifying the position.
Yeah, yeah. And then I was on top for the I think we were there a month, just about a month. We went up, I think it was April 11th. I'm pretty sure it was April 11th. I think we went off just about at the end of the month. We combat assaulted off to another just fire base, and that's when I went into the rear. I worked in the brigade headquarters, operation officer in the brigade.
So when you got transferred to the rear, how long did you have in the field at that point?
About 8 months.
And the policy generally was after 6 months?
6 months, yeah, usually, yeah. And it, I'll say it now, but, you know, I don't know if that's really fair. You know, some of these young privates and sergeants, they're a year. And there's a big difference a year. And granted, I was, like when we walked, I was the third. We had a point, slack, and then maybe another man, then myself. I was always third or fourth in line. And I was in the first helicopter into a landing zone and things like that. But it just doesn't, you know, why, you know, I think World War II, lieutenants were, you know, if they could survive 90 days, it was, you know, they were #1 target. But in Vietnam, I didn't see how I was any more of a target in some ways than the machine gunner, because to identify me as a lieutenant wasn't that easy. You know, I didn't, you know, you don't have a big banner. You tell your radio operators, don't have your antenna, so and don't, you know, don't two of you walk, you know, right near me and all like that. Keep, and so therefore I didn't figure I'd be that much more of a target. But these other guys, like here at this convention, I'm talking to guys that came in on one day, and a year later they left the field. Where I went there and I had the thing, I only got to survive 180 days. That's what I
Did how did the men feel about that? Was there any?
no, there wasn't really. You know, and I couldn't figure out why, and I really felt for some of these guys, you know, and I said, geez, you know, and when I like even today when you hear the story, some of these guys, because, you know, circumstance, some guys went through the thing and never saw anything, you know, the rear area guys, and that kind of, you know, they get the same combat pay if you're in Saigon as a guy that's humping a 100-pound rock who changes his clothes 4 times a year or 5 times a year. And it doesn't seem, life's not fair, and freedom is not free. You know, there's a price to pay for everything, and that's just the hierarchy system of it. And I don't know if it's good. I don't try to judge it, but I do. The guys that I was with, I would do anything. You know, they are the salt of the earth, and it's funny that I feel. You know, we were talking last night to one of the guy, and I said, you know, I feel sorry that I wasn't. We were talking about this battle after Ripcord, that on Hill 902. That these guys really got their pants drawn, and I said, you know, I was sorry. Now it's weird. I'm sorry I wasn't there. And the other guy says, you know, he says, so am I, because it's your buddies and the camaraderie. That part of the camaraderie, you don't realize how close you are. Like, you know, you say you're willing to give your life up, but you don't really know what it is to feel it, and to extent that it can be there. It really, really is deep. And, you know, you ask me now, would I give my life up? I say, hell no, you know. But you become so, this guy that my RTO at night, I knew more about his wife, I think, than he even did. Because we sit and we talk, and after a while, you know, if you're with a guy and there's nobody else to talk to, you really know that guy, and you do anything. And it just, you know, one guy was killed. One guy was killed. I had one guy killed, and they came up and they said, could we give him this medal? And, you know, it just, it irritated the shit out of me that by giving him a medal, you could buy, it makes it all right. You know, it just, when they came up, the next day on the radio, he came over and he says, what do you think about giving him this medal? And I said, you know, God, it just, you know, I wanted him to get something. Yeah, I'm not that. It wasn't that I didn't want it. But it's such a lowly thing to bring up when a guy gave the ultimate. And whether he believed that he was doing the right thing, he did it. And I think you don't do it, maybe I'm really going off the deep end here. You don't do it for your country. You do it for the guy who's next to you. Mm-hmm. There's that much more. And like these guys that we are here with today now, and you yourself have experienced things that they're esprit de corps and everything. It's really enmeshed in. You know, I've had a miraculous life. I've done things that I never in my whole life ever dreamed of, and it meant so much to me. And I've had a talk with my wife. You know, I says, my life went downhill after Vietnam. It didn't matter how successful I would have been or could have been or anything, or I was. And you know, in present day thing, I was successful. But my life still went downhill after Vietnam. That was the peak, I think. And if you would have said that before when I was drafted, I was even thinking, man, I'm going to Canada, I'm going to do something, you know. And never I could have, you know. Yeah. America is America to me, and I'm a flag waver from way back. But I really, I don't know. It just
the pinnacle. So now you were taken out of the field, and you had a job with brigade.
Yeah.
What did you do with brigade?
I was for 8 at night to 8 in the morning. I was on the radios to every battalion and company. They could call me and ask for resupplies, you know, airstrikes, and I'd handle up. You know, I get there was a helicopter gunship guy was in the talk with us, and there was a group of, we could contact everything they wanted, and it was they call and say we like this, we like that, and we more or less give it out. And
did you feel in your job, having, you know, been in the bush for 7 months, that you had maybe more of a sense of urgency doing that job than somebody else would have? You had a lot of empathy there?
What was funny was you know, you're thinking, oh God, I'm out of it. But you know, whenever your unit or you would extra listen to that, and like the first reunion I went to after, the guys would say they read my reports, and they got the 101st report, and from the brigade head, and it was my reports, and they said, "Do you remember this?" And I said, "No." And they said, "You wrote it. It's all your writing." I said, "I don't remember anything," you know. And so it's in the headquarters of about that period of time. So.
While you were in Vietnam, did you witness any drug abuse? Or
Well, this is always the thing, you know. Since then I've been interested on that, and I never ever. Now this is people are if read this or hear this will say, well, he's crazier than hell because all the Vietnamers are druggies and everything. I never ever in the field. I stress, in the field, saw any drugs. And I discussed it with Captain Vasquez last night. I said, you know, I've been getting this question that, you know, they're all druggies and all that. I says, did you ever have the sensation? He says, no, there was none in our unit. Now, you know, I don't know how he can be that positive, but I never saw it. Now, in the base camps, yeah.
How about back when you were back to
At Evans, and that's why I didn't like it there.
Okay.
Because they call it our perimeter. And they said, don't ever go to the perimeter. Like if I didn't ever had to because I was working 8 in the night to 8 in the morning. But you can be an operations officer and you go around to all these bunker complexes and they say, make sure you give the guys in the bunker a chance to put it out and things because you might get shot. And they say there's enemy coming if you get caught. You know, so I don't know if this is old wives' tales or not. I never had that thing. But the thing was, and that's one reason I didn't want to be in the rear. Because you could be overrun there. All our guns, when we went to the rear, were locked up in the Connex.
All right, that tape has just run out there, so.
Geez, man, I'm talking too much. You know?
No, sir, you're not. Actually, we're just about.
Possibly, we're basically in the rear areas, although you don't have any experience of...
No. The thing out in the field, which, if you're in a fighting position, in a foxhole, if you call it foxhole, now we didn't have too many real foxholes. But if you're in a fighting position, and there's 3 of you there, and you wake up in the middle of the night, and this guy's smoking his marijuana or doing some other drug, and you look at him and he's in Never Never Land, your life is his. You know, he's responsible for your life. And I think if there wasn't the leadership of the unit would do something, but I think the individual guys would do something. I don't think they would stand for somebody, you know. It may happen. You may get 3 guys in one hole that would go crazy. But I never, ever saw it or thought of it even. And it never was a problem till I got home. And then everybody says, oh, those high Vietnam veterans, they're unemployed, no goods. And it's just the opposite to me. It seems like that we were one of the tighter groups because when we went home, everybody hated us. You know, I can remember, don't wear your uniform when you leave Fort Lewis, Washington, because you're going to get in trouble. They're going to, you know. And I can remember going back to my hometown and a car backfire, and I'd be crawling along the storefront. I'd be down on my hands and knees crawling, and people would be pointing at me and things like this, and it embarrassed the hell out of me. But for the first 2 months, I couldn't. It's natural, you know, a loud explosion or a loud pop or something, you react first because that was the response you had to.
Yeah, your startle response is there, and
So,
it was learned.
Yeah. So in some that may be some of the reason why people thought these guys are crazy, because they're doing obvious crazy things, which is so obtuse to what normal people walking down the street would do. But
What was the racial makeup of your company?
we had maybe 6 or 7 blacks, and you know everybody was one, and that's how I felt. I know what it's like to be the other one. I know what it's like to be the only one, you know. And in Africa, I was it. And people knew what I did before I did it. And I know how that can be. And people would you know, sense and other things have shaken their head. You don't know what it's like. I do. And they weren't badly treated. Nobody was badly treated or anything. But everybody was equal. And I don't think, and the guy, there were, you know, we were, the thing about these reunions is you talk about everything. And sooner or later the subject comes around to everything. And that comes up and, you know, everybody a lot of times says, I wish these guys would show up. I wish these guys would show up. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if they, I don't want to say brainwashed, but saying that this was a white man's war, and I don't know if that's the case, but there's got to be feelings, because I have feelings for a lot of the guys that I was with, and you know, they're no different than any other guy, and it's the world is, you know, we say that we've changed in the sense that in the United States we have a black president. But does that change what we've had? Has things changed drastically because of that? No. In Canada, they say, where I live now, I'm one of the few people who go there after Vietnam than before. But up there, they have racism, and they think it doesn't exist. You know, like a couple weeks ago, at a hockey game, there was this black player from Philadelphia. They were playing in London, Ontario, which is a medium-sized city in Ontario, and somebody threw a banana on the ice. And the people said, "Oh, that wasn't racism. That didn't mean anything. That was like in Detroit. They throw an octopus, and then someplace else they do this, someplace else." But it was. And they don't want to admit that they're as racist as anybody else. It's human nature, in some ways, to be racist. But it's the degree that it comes out. God, you better like yourself, because if you don't, who, you know, and it's really strange that probably in Canada, living in a place where you're outside looking in, like I'm outside now looking into the United States, and I think if everybody had that perspective, they would like their country a hell of a lot more than they do if they live here. It's really hard to be up there and listen to the newspaper. Oh, the United States is a cause of the economy being bad. Oh, the United States is this. Hell, why are they wait for us to do something, and then they do the same thing after us. And you know, my wife goes nuts when I start ranting and raving about that part. But it's human nature. You know, it's, I don't know, it's a mixed up world in some ways. It's too bad it isn't right. But.
Okay, so you finished up with brigade, then you rotated home.
Yeah. That taking off in that airplane.
Where did you
I left Da Nang.
Da Nang, okay.
And you get on the thing and it's quiet, quiet, quiet. And you sit down in that seat, and all of a sudden, that plane starts rolling, and when it lifts off, everybody's yelling. It's just like, you know, I don't know. It was the weirdest sensation.
Now, as an officer, did they put you in first class?
No. But a funny thing was that when like I told you, I lost my shoes, my low quarter shoes. So when I ended up, we flew to Takota Air Force Base in Japan, spent an hour, and then flew to Seattle, Washington. And when I landed, I got medevaced because I didn't have any shoes. I had my boots again. And so they took me with the medevac people that were on emergency. So it was beautiful because I got right in, I got my shoes, and the funny thing, oh, this is the government. This is how great our government, I went in, and because an officer has to buy his uniforms. Mm-hmm. So I went and I got these shoes. They're $8.25. So hell, I didn't have any money. You know, I've been, I got some MPC, but they wouldn't take that. So I signed for my shoes. So, okay, the shoes are paid for. I get them on, I get on the plane, and I fly out. I left the Army. 10 years go by, nothing. I get a bill for $8.25 for a pair of shoes. Now this just blows my mind. I just completely lose it. So I love to write letters that I think I'm in charge and I know what I'm doing. So I wrote the government and I says, by the way, I left on payday in Vietnam. I had all but $50 of my money deposited in the States in an account, but $50 I got in cash. When I left Vietnam, I never got paid. I never got paid any place in the Army. So I says, by the way, if you can find that $50, take the $8.25 out of it, and please pay me the interest of the $50 for 10 years, because I never got anything other than that money. And about 2 years later, I get a check for, I don't know, $80.37 or something. It's all this money, interest at such and such a rate, and it comes out, I got it. And so I said, haha, I was giving up the 50 because I just didn't want the hassle.
Did they show a deduction for the $8?
Yeah, oh yes, the government wouldn't miss that. No. We got a big laugh. I kept every piece of paper. I still got that. I'm a collector of everything, so I still got all that stuff.
How did you, I'm going to talk about your experience at Fort Lewis in a minute, but being an OCS officer, how did you feel you were treated vis-a-vis like the West Pointers, the ROTC guys, in the hierarchy?
Well, West Point is all career. And wartime makes a career. And what in wartime makes a career? Medals make a career. The higher things and things you get make a career. So in our company I think we had at least two West Point. We had them over time because the company commander, my first company commander was West Point, and then we had a couple lieutenants who were West Point, and then we had my buddy my other lieutenant, he was OCS like I was. But so my thing was, I'm not career. I'm 2 years. That's my career. And so my idea was get home. I want to arrive home. I would do everything told, but I wouldn't do, I shouldn't say I wouldn't do, but I didn't go looking as much as I probably could have. If I was really, I did everything there wasn't, and the people, like Sergeant it was Sergeant, but Captain Vasquez, he in his book he wrote, he mentions his lieutenants were number 1. But the rumor got around, if you wanted to live and go back to the States, get with Lieutenant Wallace, because his motto is hide and slide. And this Campbell, who was another OCS, he says, how in the hell can the enemy find you when we can't even find you? He says, because you keep such a low profile and you're out and hiding and sliding. But the interplay of the officers was fantastic with us. We never had any, you know, there was joking, you know, because everybody, all the OCS said, oh, or what are you going to do, knock them over with your West Point ring, because of the big West Point rings, but it was all good fun and things. And they were good guys too, you know, and you know, like Lieutenant Lee was when I first got there, and he was there just about the whole time. He was wounded 3 or 4 times, like going up to the DMZ. He got a bunch of shrapnel in him and things. And, you know, he'd come back every time because that was his thing. He was a career, and that was his ambition to be a. But you know, when I got ready to get out, they said, here's your captain's bars, or here's your discharge. And to me, you can see the lighting on the wall. Here I'm a OCS thing. There's no way I can be a career officer. There's no way. By that time, I knew I would spend 1 year in the States after they give me so much. I don't know how much time. But I would be back in Vietnam probably as a company commander if the war continued, you know, at the current rate and levels. But it didn't. I don't think. I knew right then that if it slowed down any, there's going to have to be a major rift because they got so many of these OCS officers. They got. And so I would have been rifted. I knew that. So I thought of saying, I really did. And I almost could have shot myself if I would have went back in time and said, you who, you know, the Army is you know, my uncle was in World War II and he retired and he was a captain in the Navy. He ended up a captain. My brother in the Air Force, who tried to be a fighter pilot and got airsick so bad that they kept taking him up and getting him flips and flops to see if he could survive it. They washed him out of flight school, but he ended up a lieutenant colonel. Okay. And you know, I enjoyed the Army at that point. I liked the structure. I liked the, you know, you knew where you stood. I didn't like some of the ways that promotions and things were in, but that's beside the point. But I knew I couldn't go any farther, and it so happened that the job I went in with U.S. Customs, and a lot of the guys that came to U.S. Customs after I got there were rifted Army lieutenants, you know, and they were captains at that point, and they were all rifted out. But I enjoyed a bad situation. Like I collected, and West Texas has a collection of memorabilia or something. They came to one of our reunions, and I was telling them what I've collected. Like they used to fly over us in an operation when we went into different areas and drop pamphlets. And I've got a collection. I got notebooks full. I collected and saved all these.
All the Chu Hoi pamphlets?
That type of pamphlets. I got Chu Hoi from the North Vietnamese sides. I've got pamphlets like that I kept. You know, I'm a pack rat in a lot of ways, and it's fun, you know. And I haven't looked at a lot of this stuff. And like I was telling you yesterday, I don't know. I used to write letters to all kinds of people. I used to just sit at home or at night waiting for darkness, and I'd write letters. And I read in the Stars and Stripes where Tricia Nixon, on her birthday, was sick. So I wrote this nice letter saying, it's so sad to be sick on your birthday. I hope you're feeling better. And I took the letter and put it in the thing, wrote free in the corner because you didn't have to put stamps, and I mailed it. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, boom, in the mail. About a week, 2 weeks later, a letter comes from the White House stationery. And everybody in the back went, oh my God, what's happening? He's got a promotion, he's going to be general here. And it was, Tricia wrote me a beautiful letter, I still got it today, that she thanked me for wishing her well on her, in my time of trouble, she wrote that I could think of her. And I did this to every celebrity, and I wrote to Big Pen, I says, I was writing an operations officer one day and your pen failed me. They sent me a gross of pens, you know, saying I hope that it never happens again. But it was just fun. I wrote to different companies and asked, like Tabasco sauce and things like that, and they sent the little Tabasco things.
It's interesting. So you get to Fort Lewis. Now, at this point, were you processing out of the service? Or?
No, I was just,
Okay.
they gave me 30 days leave, and I went the thing, and then that was the funny thing. When I left Vietnam, they asked me my dream choices, where I want to go, and you know, everybody picks, you know, I probably should have picked like Fort Devens or close to home or someplace or around there, I don't know. But when I was at Fort Polk, I liked it, and I really, really liked it, and so I put Fort Polk, and nobody in the world had ever asked. And this guy, his eyes got about this big, and he says, you want to go where? And I says, Fort Polk. He says, we've never had anybody request that. And so I obviously, I was one of the first people to ever get the Fort Polk where they asked for it. And so I went down, and I love like Africa. I think I missed Africa. So I used to go out at night in the bayous with my rowboat and listen to the alligators honking in the thing. But I enjoyed it down there. And I became a company commander of, it was a major slot, and here I'm a lowly lieutenant, of a company of about 300 Vietnam veterans that were going to get out of the service, in a few days, you know, 3 to 6 months. And I had to sell them savings bonds. I had to go to the jail in Leesville, Virginia, to bail them out of jail during New Year's. I had one guy commit murder down in New Orleans. And, you know, these guys were they just wanted out of the service, and they had to just serve their time in Fort Polk till they got out. And they're all E5s and up. They ran the ranges and things at Fort Polk when I came back. And
So you did that for how long?
I got back, so I got back in August, September I had off. From September till February. And then I was discharged, and they said when I got out, they had, here's a captain's bars, and here's your thing. And they says, is there anything physically wrong with you? And when I was in Vietnam, I got some foot fungus, you know, I lose my toenails like once every month. I said, hell, I'm not going to say that. They're going to make me stay. So I said, no, there's nothing. And I discharged. And then I went back to at Christmas. We used to get letters from school kids, and on the way home I stopped in Rochester, New York at the school that I had been writing to. I sent them a kangaroo from Australia, and I sent the things, and I had kept all the letters, and so the previous night I read them all, and we went to the school, and I had a lot of fun with the kids. They were in, I think it was third grade, and this was fourth grade.
And this was a class that was writing you when you were in Vietnam.
Yeah. And I sent them MPCs. I sent them Chu Hoi pamphlets through the mail. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thank you very much for interviewing Bob. I really appreciate your story. It's great. And
It's probably not the normal story.